In most American churches today, we have four generations that make up the majority of the people sitting in those chairs or those pews. Those four generations are the silent generation, the baby boomer generation, Generation X, and millennials. But I want to talk with you a little bit about who the millennials are, because in many ways, they are the most misunderstood generation in our churches today, but they are also the largest generation in American history, while being the smallest represented in all of our churches. So there are 90 million millennials in the United States today. Those are individuals who were born between 1982 and 2001. So nearly 90 million people, but only a small fraction of them are actively involved in churches or express any interest in spiritual things. So we as a larger church, capital C, big church, need to pay attention to this subculture that exists among us and consider what it would be like to view millennials not just as younger versions of ourselves or younger versions of the culture that we've grown up in, but what if we considered them as a cross-cultural ministry opportunity? What if we saw millennials truly as a separate culture with their own values, their own beliefs, and their own worldview? How would that change the way we go about ministry? So what I want to kind of frame here is, if we look at the broader American society, we are a culture that asks people to question things. We ask people to think for themselves, be their own person, challenge the man, whoever they may think that is, and push against established norms. And in many ways, this is a beautiful thing. And from a faith perspective, it could be the framework of asking someone to own their faith rather than just blindly following along with what they've been told. But for many millennials, what they tell us in research and in conversation is that when they get to churches and they start asking questions, they're met by the people in those churches with responses of, well, you're just supposed to believe. Just have faith. Don't ask such questions. Those types of questions mean you don't really love Jesus. When what the millennials are trying to say is, faith is such a significant part of who someone is, and my spirituality is such a foundational part to me, that I need to be able to ask hard questions to know what is mine and what isn't mine. What can I give my life for, and what can't I? And as a church, we need to be able to get behind those questions, to support those questions, and to be a space that millennials can come and push against our traditions and push against our norms. And we can bring them back to the gospel, and we can bring them back to Jesus, because we focus on who Jesus is, not on all these peripheral things that we've just become comfortable with. So what I would challenge churches to do, and what I would challenge people in ministry to do, is consider three things that we need to do differently. One is re-envision the church's mission. For many churches, numbers was the name of the game for decades. How many people can you get in the door? And in many ways, that was a great goal. The more people that come through the door, the more people that hear the gospel, and the better chance that someone would come to a relationship with Jesus. But that was a different culture. And today, the focus needs to be more on making disciples, not on making converts. So what does it look like for me as an individual, or as a community of believers, or as a church, to say, you know what, we are going to dig deep and focus in on really developing a small handful so that that handful can then go out and exponentially impact the people around them. It is not so much about the quantity as it is about the quality of disciple making. Number two is to engage the doubts that millennials bring. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, this is that ability for church leaders, ministry leaders, just other believers to say, you know what, I believe that my God is big enough to handle your questions. And I may not have all the answers, but that's okay. We can explore them together, because my God can handle it. He can handle your questions. He can handle your doubts. He is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and he can welcome you in with those questions. Third is to re-envision ministry. Oftentimes when I'm talking with churches, one of the things I will ask them to consider is, what are the things you're doing that are truly biblical, and what are the things you're doing because they're a habitual? So what are the things in our churches that we do because that's what makes us comfortable? It's our tradition, it's what we've known, that we may need to say, you know what, to reach this generation and this point in history, what happens if church meets on a Tuesday night instead of a Sunday morning? What happens if if we mix up the order of the service, or we use a different type of music, or we have small groups that meet in our home instead of on the church campus. But what if we do things in order to meet the needs of the people we're trying to reach rather than meet our comfort needs? And so as we re-envision the church's mission, as we engage people's doubts, and as we re-envision what ministry can look like, what we're fundamentally doing is saying there is a group of 90 million people that God cares about and that we should care about. And if they were living in another country, we would do everything we could to figure out the most culturally appropriate way to minister to them. But because they live here, we often struggle to take that same approach. So I would challenge you to consider how you might engage a millennial in a way that meets them with where they're at, recognizing that their culture may be very different than yours, but God's heart for them is no less emboldened and impassioned to see them come to him than he was to see you come to. So welcome the millennials in, engage their doubts, and be a place that they can experience Jesus in a new and fresh way.